It has been unlike any trial we've ever covered at Court TV. A woman charged with the murder of a police officer rallies the support of complete strangers who donate money and show their support in person at the courthouse and online on social media. The story absolutely takes off and becomes one of the most divisive cases we've ever covered, where advocates from both sides attack each other online, in person, and make the outcome of an alleged domestic murder case a personal mission. The victim is Boston police officer John O'Keefe. The accused is Karen Reed. And after more than 2 months, all the evidence is in, and today the arguments were made.
Could you ever say to yourself, this is justice? The fact is, there was no collision. A car did not kill John O'Keefe. So I ask you, let your voice be heard, not in whispers, but in truth. Let the community feel, through your verdict, that justice cannot be bent and that it will not be buried. Find Karen Reed not guilty, not guilty, not guilty.
John O'Keefe is not a body. John O'Keefe was not a buffalo on a prairie. John O'Keefe was a person, and he was murdered by Karen Reed.
And now the case is in the hands of the jury, and we are live from the courthouse with all the big moments and all the anticipation as the retrial of the century gets closer to its dramatic ending. I'm Vinnie Politan. Welcome to Closing Arguments. Today, closing arguments. The jury has the case. Unbelievable day. End of another week. And when you take a step back, right? Just take a step back, folks, like I just did. Take a step back and think about how our system works. That it's 12 strangers get a notice in the mail and end up deciding all of this. 12 people you don't know, but 12 people who have sworn to be fair and impartial and base their verdict on the evidence inside that courtroom. They all have to agree. That's tough to get 12 people to agree to anything these days. Didn't happen in the last trial, but that's the way the system works. So 12 people who didn't know each other, 12 people who didn't know any of the parties involved here, 12 people who may have never seen a trial before will decide this case. Now, the public outside of the courtroom, 80-20 split. That's about what we're talking. I look at all these polls that everyone is doing. I look at websites that are doing polls, Court TV polls, more than 50,000 people responding to it. And that's roughly the average of all these polls. 20% of the people think she's guilty. 80% of them believe Karen Reed is not guilty. And the overwhelming majority of that 80% it's not just that she's not guilty, that she's factually innocent, that she did not do this. And the question that I have about those 12 strangers in the box in the courtroom is, did the jury watch the same trial that the public watched? I'm wondering. Now, what's unique here is that the public knows a little bit more, and in some cases a lot more than that jury. But still, were they watching the same trial? I had the same question during the Johnny Depp case, and it was in sync. But I was also down in Central Florida years ago. You know I hate to bring it up. And the overwhelming, I would say 98% of the public thought that woman was guilty of killing her daughter, Kaylee Marie, and the jury said not guilty. So you never know. You never know. But that's really the question. Did they watch the same trial that we all watched? And when I say we, I mean the members of the public who overwhelmingly have decided that Karen Reed is not guilty. Now, closing arguments today, and these two lawyers, completely different. Completely different. Even though they're making the same gesture here in opposite directions, they were completely different. And what was different about them, yeah, their tone, the way they present things, etc. That's almost always the case, right? Because they're just different humans, they communicate differently. But where their focus was in this case, both were leaning into the strongest arguments they had. You had Hank Brennan leaning into Karen Reed's statements. Statements at the scene, statements to the media in those clips that were played. He also leaned into the digital evidence, the digital data, and the timeline of everything. That's where his focus was. Alan Jackson talking about Trooper Proctor. Trooper Proctor, who didn't even testify, became the centerpiece of the defense argument today. Both sides did a great job, I thought, in framing their cases, but they're completely different frames. He also talked a lot about the lack of injuries of John O'Keefe, how it's just not consistent with someone who was struck by a car. So there you have it, folks. What a day. And guess who was there for all of it? Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson, who is joining us live from outside the courthouse in Dedham tonight. Matt, great to see you. Wasn't just closing arguments today. It was the first day of deliberations, the first day of our verdict watch here. What can you tell us?
I was waiting for you to toss to me by saying yet another big, big day, because it was exactly that here at the courthouse here behind me in Dedham, Massachusetts. So finally, we're in a verdict watch after 8 weeks of testimony with nearly 50 witnesses for this jury. We didn't lose not one juror this time around in the retrial, and they have the case. So these deliberating jurors have been in that room for 1 hour, 47 minutes deliberating before they went home for the day. Here's reaction from defendant Karen Reed. Take a listen. Are you going to be
verdict watch? What do you like to do?
Not much you can do but try to occupy your mind.
How do you feel that it's almost over?
Ready.
Anything to say to your supporters?
Thank you. I love that.
Reed saying that she's thankful for her supporters, echoing that. We saw that during the first trial as well, and they're growing in number. We'll talk about that. But in comparison to the first trial, so we're in day one of this verdict watch of the retrial of the century. Compare that to last year, where the verdict watch spanned over 4 or 5 days, depending on how you look at it. And then that was, of course, a mistrial. But this defendant, Karen Reed, says that she believes in this jury. She hand-selected them along with the attorneys, and she is ready for a verdict, Vinnie.
I think everyone is ready for a verdict. You know, 3.5 years, second trial, all the passionate opinions on both sides. This jury knows that there was a first trial, so I think this jury will work even harder to reach that unanimous verdict, whatever it is. How about outside the courthouse today? It seemed like there's just a little bit more activity, a little more buzz outside the courthouse.
Man, you could say that again, you know, because leading up to this retrial, the buffer zone, it was pushed out, right? A few blocks. You've been here. And there were a lot fewer supporters than we saw last year in the very beginning weeks of this retrial. Well, today, completely different. The whole street was lined with people, much of them in pink, taking pictures of the defendant, cheering her on, but in a different way, which we'll talk about. And of course, I reached out to these supporters, interviewed a few, and asked why it was so important for them to be out here. Take a listen. Why did you want to come down here today to the courthouse? Why is it important for you both to be here?
Well, when we saw that the jury was going to get the case today and start deliberating, we just wanted to be down here. I thought Alan Jackson absolutely smashed it. I mean, just out of the park. I thought it was more than I expected. It was just brilliant. Not like nothing I've ever seen.
Alan Jackson is amazing, and the whole defense team, they are the best. They are the best. They have high integrity. I just have the utmost respect for them. And Alan Jackson did a phenomenal job in the closing arguments. He told the story, and it was very credible, because it is.
So big crowds like we saw last year out in front here. But the big difference this year is that the defense team, those attorneys still under gag order, but they are able to interact with the crowd of people out here. And here's what they're telling them.
means more to us than you can imagine. But if the volume comes up even a little bit, we're gonna be ordered to stay in the building, and y'all are gonna be ordered off the lawn. So just please do us that favor. This means as much as you yelling out. Bless your heart.
Thank you, Jackson.
God bless.
Alan Jackson encouraging the supporters that are out here each and every day to show their support, but be silent in a way and maybe show some sign language. This is them. This is video of silent supporters outside the courthouse each and every day as we've led into the verdict watch, and especially in the verdict watch. Here's why. Because there is still that buffer zone in place. And they're especially cautious of the fact that the jury is now deliberating. And these supporters are concerned that even though the buffer zone has been laxed, remember it was expanded this year and upheld in a higher court, that it can be in place. The rules have laxed a little bit as long as there's no signage and as long as there's no shouting to where the deliberating jury can hear it inside the courthouse here behind me.
That makes sense. It's still America. So I get it. They're not violent. They're standing there. They're just standing there, which is, you know, it's a tradition in this country, especially in a very historic town like Dedham. All right, what do we know about the jury? There were so many potential jurors, you know, 18 of them. So what do we know about the 12 who ended up winning the lottery today?
Yeah, really extraordinary for everyone that's doing their duty as a citizen, right? Like you talked about it in the beginning, how they received something in the mail. For many of these people, they've been a part of this trial for 11 weeks. Jury selection took 3 weeks to choose 18 people. That included the 6 alternates that we found out who they were today. In the beginning, when the jury was selected to be in the box and hear all the case evidence, that was 9 men and 9 women. Well, today, they used an old-fashioned bingo rotary, and the court clerk, he pulled out the numbers of the unlucky 6 that had to hear all the case evidence, and they're still on standby. So here is the breakdown of the deliberating jury, and let's put that on your screen. So it breaks down like this. 7 women and 5 men. They are the deliberating jury. The 4-person is selected from seat 1 in the courtroom, chosen by the court. That's exactly what happened last year. I did happen to notice that, you know, they were pretty casual today for day 1 of deliberations. We knew that Judge Beverly Kanye wanted them to get the case today and work. She was going to allow them to work until as late as 5:30. Remember, security, they pretty much wrap up with their contract at 4 p.m. each day, which is the reason why that court schedule has been the way that it is. They chose not to work past 4:30 today. They have the weekend now, and they're going to return here on Monday. But sometimes it's a little bit telling as to how the jury dresses. And today I was seeing some T-shirts, some hoodies, nothing wrong with that. It's been hot out here. And also polo shirts.
Yeah, if they dress up, look out. Because I had a trial in that courthouse, same exact thing. Dressed up on Friday. That morning we got the verdict. All right, Matt, thanks so much. Rest up this weekend. I'll be there Monday. I will join you Monday on the courthouse steps. I will close this trial out this time, and I'll make sure that there's a verdict. Matt Johnson in Dedham. All right, let's bring in our Karen Reed insiders, trial attorney Wayne Dennison, former prosecutor Margaret McLean. She's also the host of It's a Crime with Margaret McLean, along with Kevin Lenahan, author of the book Storm of Suspicion, the Karen Reed Trials, and Karen Reed supporter and insider Nick Rocco. Great to see everyone. All right. Let's get to it. Closing arguments today. We'll start with Margaret McLean. What's your takeaway today?
Well, first of all, both attorneys did an excellent job, but in my opinion, I just loved Hank Brennan's passion. He came out, he said Karen Reed made a selfish choice. She was drunk, she hit him, she left him to die. Then he seamlessly took the jury through the facts, science, and the timeline. And I also liked how he used visuals to explain his timeline, and how he weaved the interviews to show, especially on the intoxication charge. And I also really liked on the second-degree murder, he really explained that charge well, saying it's all about the act. And then that reference with the boulder, throwing the boulder off the overpass, you're attempting, you're trying to damage a car, but somebody gets killed, that's second-degree murder. I think he did a top-notch job all around.
We've got one for the prosecutor, Wayne Dennison. What was your takeaway today?
I was really quite blown away by how effective Alan Jackson was. In fact, I got a text from the former chief of the public defenders in D.C. today that said the defense is really scoring points. And I agree with him. I thought it was an extraordinarily well done presentation. And quite frankly, if this case from a defense perspective is, if they cannot prove that John O'Keefe got hit by a car, she's not guilty. End of story.
Nick Rocco, what's your takeaway today?
Yeah, I mean, Wayne pretty much took the words that I was thinking. Alan Jackson came out and made sure he understood. He let the jury know what reasonable doubt is, and basically laid it out all on the table. And one of the things that I thought was interesting was as he was laying out all this reasonable doubt on the TV screen behind him, there were these little cards that were kind of getting thrown on the table. Like, look, here's another reasonable doubt. Here's another one. Here's another one. And if you're holding any of those cards, when you go into that deliberation room, you have to vote not guilty. And, no matter how well Hank Brennan may have done potentially in his closing statements, no matter what he says, he cannot get over the mountain of reasonable doubt in this case, no matter what he says. So I think obviously, I'm in favor of the defense on this one, but now it's up to the jury.
Yeah, 12 people. Kevin Lenahan, what's your big takeaway from closing arguments today?
So for the last 15 years, I've been screenwriting, fiction writing, and you take these elements of truth and you weave them into a narrative, a story that really is fictional. But so and this is what happened. Margaret just addressed the brilliance of the closing of Hank Brennan. Now, I thought Alan Jackson definitely was brilliant too, brilliantly written, brilliant performance. However, he's taking half-truths and trying to turn them into realities. And just a couple of examples of that. He talks about John's clothing, how it was in the hands of Michael Proctor for weeks or even months, he said. Well, no, the reality is it went to the evidence room in the Norfolk County DA's office that night, where it was expected to go, where it always goes. 6 weeks later, that's where he gets weeks or months. It was transferred, as is normal, to a lab for testing. So it's a half-truth that's spun into a fiction. Same thing with Kelly Devers, who we know from the facts that show that she actually was not even in the station when the Lexus arrived. She had already left for the day. Jackson leaves this out. And the same thing with Kerry Roberts, lying, but she said it was not intentional, which is not a lie. It can go on and on. The whole thing was fiction.
We've got a lot to get to this hour. When we come back, we're going to take a look at those closing arguments and how both sides dealt with the issue of was there or was there not a collision. Plus, coming up next hour. Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, the retrial of the century is coming to a close. All the evidence is in and the arguments have been made, but there are still some lingering issues and unanswered questions. Tonight, we investigate.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates. Tonight, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV.
The brutal murders of 4 University of Idaho students.
Detectives arrested Brian Kohlberger.
I pray that we have justice.
The Idaho College student murders trial. Live coverage begins this August, only on Court TV.
There was no collision. There was no collision. There was no collision.
She was drunk. She hit him, and she left him to die. She was drunk. She hit him, and she left him to die.
Both sides repeating themselves because it's super important. The collision, the alleged collision, this is the most important element of all the charges that has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt by prosecutors. If they don't prove that there was a collision beyond a reasonable doubt, Karen Reed walks out of that courthouse. Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. So let's take a look at both sides framing this issue for the jury.
Not a single medical expert called by the defense or called by the Commonwealth has testified that John was hit by a car. We know that a person struck by a vehicle suffers massive trauma, broken bones, fractures, soft tissue damage, torn ligaments, contusions, soft tissue injury, severe tissue injury, crushing blows. None of that was present with John. None of it. Not anywhere on his body, including his right arm. Not one bruise. Dr. Scordi-Bello was presented with the Commonwealth's theory of the case, the same case that you've been presented with, and she refused to conclude that John's death was a homicide. She flatly refused to conclude that there was a collision. Dr. Wolf and Dr. Rentschler, you just met them recently. They explained they were not initially hired by the defense. They were asked by another agency to conduct their analysis. They looked at the evidence from both sides, not taking a side for the defense or the Commonwealth, completely independent. Both PhDs, both engineers determined there was no collision. I'm not saying it. The science says it. In every single test at every single speed, the taillight damage was inconsistent with striking an arm. In every test, the taillight damage was inconsistent with damaging the shirt. ARCA testing established that all the internal components of every single test taillight, especially the diffusers, remained completely intact. Conversely, on Karen's taillight, the diffusers were almost completely gone. At 5:07 a.m. at One Meadows, that's the photograph on the left. What do you notice about the right taillight? It's completely illuminated. Later, at 4:12 in the afternoon, photograph on the right, it's lit up. How can that be? How can that be if the Commonwealth claims that those diffusers, the portion that lights up the light, were already scattered all over 34 Fairview? The Commonwealth's theory is that the sleeve of John's hoodie sweatshirt was damaged by flying shards of taillight slicing through the shirt and through John's arm. I have 3 questions. Number 1, John's arm had about 36 abrasions. How did 36 shards of acrylic go through 9 tiny little puncture holes? How'd that happen? Somebody needs to answer that. Number 2, why are there no slices or cuts in the hoodie? All the defects are punctures. Punctures that you might get from, say, I don't know, canine teeth. And number 3, if the shards cut bloody gouges into John's arm, that's their theory, why is there no blood, no skin, no tissue on a single shard of taillight?
From 12/12 on, we virtually have a historian in the data that tells us exactly where he went, exactly step by step where he went. On the way from the waterfall to 34 Fairview, Miss Reed is driving, drunk. Mr. O'Keefe is in the passenger side of the car, and they're heading their way to 34 Fairview, and they get lost. And now we have more data because John O'Keefe has a cell phone. And I said it in the beginning, it is a historian. It doesn't suffer from bias, it doesn't suffer from prejudice, it doesn't suffer from memory loss. It has data on it. And he puts on Waze, high location data, as Ian Whiff would. They make their way down to 34 Fairview Road. They don't stop. They don't stop at the driveway. They don't stop. And John O'Keefe gets out of the car. They go to the flagpole. Miss Mason and Mr. Nagel don't see anybody get out of the truck. Nobody crosses the lawn. Nobody goes to a garage. Not just because they didn't see it. They didn't. Not because they didn't see it. Because the healthcare data on the phone shows that John O'Keefe is not moving. The car is stopped at the flagpole. The healthcare data stops. The battery stays at 77 degrees. The data is the data. You can't change it as much as you want to. John O'Keefe decides to get out of the car, and we know because the dome light goes on. That's what happens when you open a door. Whether he's bent down, he's standing outside, or on the other side, the dome light is on. And then you see the data. John O'Keefe begins to move. 12/31/56. It's the first time he has moved since they got to the flagpole, and it will be the last time he moves in his life. We know for that 20 seconds he's moving, and in that 20-second window, when he moves, he has his phone, and he looks down, 12:32:09, he sees a text message from his friend, John McCabe. And he looks at the text message, and he closes it. And then it happens. We know from the uncontroverted data from that black box, we know that Karen Reed, after he gets out of the car, drives away. She drives for at least 33 feet away from him. He's back near the flagpole, she's gone. Then she makes a decision. She could have driven home. She could have broken up with him. They could have talked about it the next day. But like knocking on the door, like Kaylee said, getting the last word, she doesn't drive away. She takes that 6,000-pound Lexus and she makes a decision. And the decision is that she steps on the gas after banging it into reverse. The glass comes with him, lands near his body. Debris field moves past him. Shoe, hat, straw. We don't know if this is the body position. We don't know if this is the exact speed, but what it tells us, this is viable. Look at the debris field. Look at his turn. Remember his sneaker on that curb? They got lodged against the sneaker. Mr. O'Keefe then falls back, hits his head, counter coup, left to die.
Okay, battle of data versus medical experts. Kevin Lenahan, your thoughts?
So the defense wants us to look for reasonable doubt. But what we need to look for, what the jury needs to look for, is reasonable conclusions, which reasonable doubt is just a part of that. If you look at the totality of the evidence. So we know, for example, that John got out of the car because of the battery temperature just 17 seconds before his phone moved for the very last time. We know that he turned off his phone just about 8 seconds before it moved for the last time. So the prosecution has carefully closed off every single possibility, so that only thing that remains is that Karen's Lexus struck John.
Nick, data versus the doctors.
I think Alan Jackson stating the fact that not one medical examiner or doctor could prove that John O'Keefe was struck by a vehicle, and actually a few of those are agreeing with the fact that those are dog bites on the arm. I think one of the biggest things that Hank Brennan is going to have to overcome is, yes, he says data, but look at his expert, who's the one that delivered the data to the jury. He was made to look like a liar about his CV. Now is the jury going to believe him about the data? So I think Alan Jackson came across a little bit smoother. But again, obviously I am biased towards the defense, so I think he killed it.
Everyone who's watching this trial is biased, so let's just leave it there. Wayne, from your perspective, it's two arguments about the same issue, approaching it from different angles here.
Yeah, it was clear that they were taking very different approaches. But I mean, ultimately, there was only one of the people who was arguing who actually has a burden of proof in this case. And unless the prosecution proves this case, Karen Reed should be acquitted. And there's only one burden of proof, and Karen Reed doesn't have to prove how John O'Keefe died.
Margaret McLean, does the data overcome the doctors? Do the doctors overcome the data? How does a jury deal with this? Because both sides making great arguments, but about completely different things, different evidence.
The doctors said there was a possibility she could have been hit by the car, a possibility, okay? And then the brain surgeon also said that, yeah, a car hitting him and him falling back in the ground could have caused that injury. And the only eyewitness was Karen Reed. She's the only one there, and I liked how Hank Brennan brought that up. So I based on that data, based on that cell phone lining up, the debris field, there was absolutely a collision.
All right, when we come back, the first trial was about this man, former trooper Michael Proctor. All of a sudden, the defense zeroing in on him in their closing argument today. We'll take a look at how both sides dealt with Trooper Proctor.
The lead investigator in a murder trial was never called to testify. Think about that. That should stop you in your tracks. Wouldn't you want to hear from Michael Proctor? Wouldn't you want to hear from the lead investigator in the case? Don't you have questions? The Commonwealth did not present their own lead investigator to the jury, the very jury who is charged with judging the investigation.
Alan Jackson talking about Trooper Michael Proctor, he was the lead investigator in this case. He was the focus of the first trial by the defense and really by all of us watching the trial. It became about Karen Reed or Trooper Michael Proctor. And he wasn't called in the retrial. It was a stunning development in all of this. He's been fired because of what happened during this investigation and other things uncovered. So today in the closing arguments, he was once again center stage by the defense. So let's take a look at what Alan Jackson had to say about him and then Hank Brennan.
This case was corrupted from the start. It was corrupted by biases and conflicts and personal loyalties that you heard about. And most fatally, it was corrupted by a lead investigator whose misconduct infected every single part of this case from the top to the bottom. But also present at the waterfall that night was Brian Albert's friend, Brian Higgins. We know that he had a romantic design on Karen. That becomes an incredibly important fact as we discuss the facts of this case. Think about the video of Brian Higgins and what Michael Proctor in his investigation completely and utterly ignored. This is what Michael Proctor in his investigation completely ignored. Higgins is very clearly upset. He's agitated. Chris Albert tries to control him. He tries to talk to him, calm him down perhaps. Chris forcefully grabs Higgins' arm. You'll see that in the video that you're about to watch. It appears that Chris is trying to calm him down from something. In an instant, Higgins angrily jerks his arm away from Chris. Higgins rubs his brow, and he directly gestures at John. A gesture that looks a lot like, let's step outside. Let's go outside. But John looks at him, takes a swig of beer, completely ignores him. And what you're going to see is that Michael Proctor, the lead investigator for the Commonwealth, did nothing to actually and properly investigate this case. Let's start with the house. That's the most logical place to start. I think you'd agree. Brian Albert's house, where John's body was discovered lifeless in the lawn. A man, a police officer, is found dead on the front lawn, and no one secures the scene. No tape, no preservation of evidence, no crime scene log, no search warrants, no consent searches, no photographs of the house interior. They didn't treat the house as a crime scene, and shamefully, they didn't even treat the yard as a crime scene. Let's not forget, this was Brian Albert's house, and that comes with privileges. Quote, is the homeowner gonna catch any? Nope. He's a Boston cop too, end quote. That quote starts to make a little more sense now. The glass on the bumper didn't match the cocktail glass. None of it. Remember, February 11th, Michael Proctor, without any other person with him, no witness, no supervisor, no other person with him, claims to have found a single piece of glass at the scene. February 11th, single piece of glass, Michael Proctor. Keep that in mind. Interestingly, the glass on the bumper that didn't match the cocktail glass, one piece did match one other thing. The Proctor glass. Those two go together. Now put in context the condition of that taillight when it was actually seized in Dighton. It was cracked, but not completely damaged.
Let's talk about Mr. Proctor. You were invoked with this emotion early in the opening that this is a cancer. That's a tough word. Trying to evoke that primal reaction, disgust. I'm not saying you shouldn't be disgusted by the text messages, you should, but that doesn't change the physical evidence, the scientific evidence, and the data. He was terminated. He paid a penalty. He was held responsible for what he did. He should have been. He should have been. But that doesn't get a free pass. That does not change. It doesn't create a conspiracy. It doesn't invent a dog. It doesn't make somebody in a house something they're not. It just doesn't. It has nothing to do with the justice in this case. It just doesn't. There's not one piece of evidence, not one, that we can look at and say, this was tampered with. This was planted. This was distorted. Remember when we introduced the taillights at the beginning? I didn't introduce 3 of the taillights, but then the defense did, so I put them in. Those were taillights that were only found by Trooper Proctor. I did not put that evidence in. Understanding those text messages and appreciating the disdain one might have for his comments. Not that there's any evidence of tampering, not that there's any evidence that it was not true, but I didn't put that evidence before you. We know the taillight wasn't planted because Trooper Buchanan and Mr. Proctor did not go down to Dighton to see Miss Reed until later in the afternoon. We know from the 507 video, we've seen that. We know the taillight was already missing when she's leaving the driveway. It's already gone. It can't be planted. At this point, Trooper Proctor's still in his pajamas. He's not even on the case. He's not even on the scene. It's gone. There can be no plant. It's already gone. You know where it is? 34 Fairview Road, on at the Retrial.
All right, we've got our insiders back. Nick Rocco, was this actually more effective this year than last year, with Proctor not being a witness and being kind of like this person that everyone's talking about, and the way Alan Jackson presented him to the jury today?
Yeah, I definitely think a lot of the people that weren't called made this trial a lot cleaner and clearer for the jury to see what's actually going on here. Last trial, there was just way too much to try to remember, way too many witness statements, and this time I think it was a lot better on both sides, I will add. But one thing I'm very surprised that Hank Brennan said in that argument was the fact that he didn't introduce evidence to the jury, taillight evidence, which is one of the biggest pieces of evidence in this case. He said he didn't introduce it to the jury. The defense did because it came from Michael Proctor. So if the defense hadn't introduced that evidence, Hank just wasn't gonna put it in there because it had to come from Michael Proctor, which I think, I hope the jury picked up on it like I did, because I think that's a red flag right there.
Margaret McLean, what does the jury take away? Like, who is this guy? They never met him, but they've heard so much about him, and Alan Jackson really made him the focus point and the theme of his entire closing argument.
Yeah, and he did it brilliantly. Of course he's going to have to do that. That's, the Proctor has been a thorn in the prosecution's side since trial 1, and a very difficult thing to handle as Proctor. So I actually have to say, I think Brennan did it as well as he possibly could. And saying that, listen, there's no proof that any evidence was planted by Proctor or there was any tampering. I mean, I would have had a hard time dealing with Proctor, as anyone would. But again, I think he covered that as best as anybody could, and Jackson did a brilliant job capitalizing on it.
Let me ask you, Kevin, can this jury trust the prosecution beyond a reasonable doubt without them calling the lead investigator, who admittedly has been disgraced in all of this? Is that enough in and of itself, do you think, for jurors to say, well, wait a minute, what's going on here?
That question might come up with them. I think Hank, the way he handled the whole case, really developed a lot of trust with this jury, but we won't know until we hear from the jurors. And I think it's important for people in the public to remember and understand that if you take away all of the evidence that Michael Proctor touched or had a hand in any way at all, it doesn't affect the case by the prosecution. Michael Proctor had nothing, the main taillight pieces that really were found by the CERT team that night had nothing to do with Michael Proctor. He wasn't there. He had nothing to do with it. Michael Proctor had nothing to do with the data. Michael Proctor had nothing to do with the main evidence that indicts Karen on this case. And just one more thing on the fight scene inside the video. Karen Reed has never said, or no other witness inside the bar has ever said, that Higgins was challenging John to a fight. And certainly Karen would have said that, right? I mean, she's done numerous TV interviews. She would have said, hey, Michael was trying to get John into a fight. So there's no evidence of that.
Wayne Dennison, I think Hank Brennan did refer to it because it's common, right, that in criminal cases there's the boogeyman, right? And I think Hank Brennan used that word today. Is this an effective use of someone who never enters the courtroom and is the boogeyman in this case? And could that shape the opinions and the way the jury sees the evidence?
So we don't generally call it the boogeyman. I usually just call it the empty chair. And you can try the case against the empty chair because the empty chair never gets to talk. And this is an absolute common trial practice and it was absolutely well done today by Alan Jackson. The notion that the prosecutor has to stand there and try to justify Michael Proctor means that he's taken away from the thrust of his argument. And quite frankly, the notion that Michael Proctor lost his job and has already been punished is irrelevant to whether this jury ought to convict Karen Reed.
All right, folks, before we run out of time here, I'm coming back into town on Monday. I'll be there, so I'll be at the courthouse all day, all night. Will I get a verdict this time? Give me your thoughts in like 15 seconds each, whether you think this jury will come to a unanimous decision. What do you think, Wayne?
Not before Tuesday.
All right, not before Tuesday. Got you there. Margaret, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it'll take at least 4 to 5 days, and I have no idea what a jury. I could see maybe the manslaughter and leaving the scene.
Okay, 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
That's where I am. I'm in the 4 to 5 day range in all this. Kevin, what are your thoughts?
So I said on my show before today, and I got a lot of people mad, that I thought the most likely result was going to be a hung jury. But then after Hank's absolutely brilliant, missing nothing closing arguments today, I changed it to, I believe there will be a guilty verdict on the manslaughter charge Monday.
Nick Rocco, your thoughts?
The only thing Hank Brennan was missing were those x-rays that Welcher didn't see. But anyways, I think if it goes before Tuesday, I'm going to go with a not guilty. If it goes beyond Tuesday, I think we're going to be a hung trial.
Okay. I think because this jury knows that this is the second trial, I think they're going to try a little harder to agree to something. What they agree to, I have no idea. I learned a long time ago that I have no idea what 12 people will do that I don't know. As a matter of fact, I don't even know what you four are going to say every night, and I know you guys. Wayne Dennison, Margaret McLean, Kevin Lenahan, Nick Rocco, thank you so much. I'll see you up in Dedham. When we come back, something else you need to know tonight, plus coming up next hour.
Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, prosecutors have used John O'Keefe's phone to attempt to prove a murder, claiming data doesn't lie. But what about Karen Reed's phone? Why haven't we heard about data from her phone? Tonight, we investigate.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates, coming up next, only on Court TV.
Karen Reed is in the midst of the retrial of the century.
She is factually innocent. She's guilty.
There's something wrong in this county. Come at me.
The Karen Reed murder retrial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
Welcome back. Time to reveal something else you need to know tonight. Let's take a look at the big board. And Kanye at the courthouse. That's right. Kanye going to the Sean Puffy Combs trial. Showed up in his white denim, but did not actually get into the courtroom. You've got to be pre-cleared and on a list, and apparently he wasn't. Went to the overflow room with Puffy's son, watched about an hour's worth of the trial, and then exited the courthouse. But reports are that Diddy was happy that his friend Kanye was there to support him, even though he did not get into the courtroom. Okay, please take a look at your television screens. We have a missing child who needs your help. This is Jordan Motley. Jordan, just 17 years old, missing from Phoenix, Arizona since June 11th. Please, if you see Jordan, pick up the phone, make a call, make a difference. 911, 1-800-THE-LOST, or you can call the Phoenix Police Department in Arizona. The number's on the screen. Let's see if we can get him to a safe place tonight. Don't go anywhere. We have another hour of live true crime. Vinnie Politan Investigates is next. In the meantime, please don't forget to hug the kids.